Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 321 of All the Sounds Dispatched Abroad. Fascinating poem. It was originally sent to and shared with Higginson, T.W. Higginson, who we've mentioned already, in a second letter, letter 261, along with poems 322 and poem 86, which we've already covered. It was titled by Higginson, "The Wind," when published in the 25th of September, 1890 in the Christian Union. Now, it is a poem that I think Emily was trying to suggest to Higginson what her poetic process is. The question of this poem is talent God-given? Where does inspiration come from? The Greeks, of course, had their notion of the muse. Of course, in the biblical tradition that Emily grew up with, it would have been understood as inspiration, to inspire, the breath, the wind. And so we're gonna play that game in this poem. Now, our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at LearnStrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already worked with our set of introductory comments. I'm hopeful that you've as well worked through our preceding 320 poems. We just finished with 320. We play at pace, and play is a key word because it's used in 320. It's also used in 321. And I think, guys, I've said this to you in our discussion of Chats with Emily, that Emily is often playing. I think she's enjoying the very idea of what it is to write poetry, to be a creative person. And this is the way she says it. Of all the sounds dispatched abroad, there's not a charge to me like that old measure in the boughs, that phraseless melody the wind does, working like a hand whose fingers comb the sky, then quiver down with tufts of tune, permitted gods and me. Inheritance it is to us, beyond the art to earn, beyond the trait to give away by robbers, since the gain is gotten out of fingers, and inner than the bone, hid, golden for the whole of days. And even in the urn I cannot vouch the merry dust do not arise and play in some old fashion of its own, some quainter holiday, when winds go round and round in bands and thrum upon the door, and birds take places overhead to bear their orchestra. I crave him grace of summer boughs, if such an outcast be, who never heard that fleshless chant rise solemn on the tree, as if some caravan of sound off deserts in the sky had parted rank, then knit and swept in seamless company. I can't help but read a poem like this and think about Shelley's Ode to the West Wind, and as well Shelley's Defense of Poetry. We've talked about both of them at LearnStrong.net. Notice she's back to sounds. Emily, the great poet of the senses, of all the sounds dispatched abroad, there's not a charge to me. In other words, I did not have to pay for the poetic inspiration that I enjoy. Like that old measure, later it'll be old, it'll be an odd fashion, old measure in the boughs, that phraseless melody. You'll remember phraseless from poem 297, and think about this phraseless melody the wind, again, this is what Higginson called it, does, working, and then like a hand whose fingers comb the sky. It's brilliant, the word picturing here. Then quiver down. Quiver as an actual word, only used once in all her poetry, and it's here. With tufts of tune, notice we're back to melody, permitted gods, notice it's plural, not singular, gods and me, which I think is the indication that she is playing with that Greek notion of where inspiration comes from. There are something special about the gods. What? They're immortal and they're omniscient. They know everything. Humans were the opposite. Sitting in between for the Greeks, as we've said in earlier lectures at LearnStrong.net, sitting in between are the poets, the artists. And I think Shelley is playing the game not only of Shelley but also of Keats. I mean, Ern gets used here in a little bit as he's thinking about that power of the poetic inspiration. Inheritance, she says it is to us. In other words, it was given to poets like us, beyond the art to earn, beyond the trait to take away by robber. In other words, whatever it is she says I have, I don't know how I got it, I can't give it away by robber, since the gain is gotten, notice here, not of fingers. So for earlier it's not a charge, now it's not of fingers, and inner than the bone. It's inspiration. Hid, she'll say it, golden for the whole of days, notice capitalized, and even in the urn, and I think she's in some ways making the allusion to Keats's Ode on a Grecian Urn, I cannot vouch the merry dust, notice capitalized, do not arise and play. By the way, this issue of agreement, any number of scholars have pointed out, notice it should be dust does, right? Dust do not rise. We'll see the same game getting played in 803, 674, and we already saw it in 165. Do not arise and play. We're back to we play at pace in poem 320. In some old-fashioned, in other words, even after death, she says, I'm not going to argue that I can't be writing poems even after I'm gone. Some quainter holiday, quainter is only used once in all her poetry, and it's here. When winds, we're back to the winds, go round and round in bands and thrum upon the door, wonderful word, but used only once in her poetry, and it's here. And birds take places overhead to bear them orchestra. In other words, the poetic muse, she's arguing, that I enjoy, is somehow born of what? Born of the nature itself, right? And then she'll use I crave. I crave him grace. Crave is only used once in all our poetry. It's here. Of summer boughs, if such an outcast be. Now when we get to poem 1060, we'll come back to this outcast. Air has no residence, no neighbor, no ear, no door, no apprehension of another. Oh, happy air, ethereal guest at Eden, an outcast's pillow, essential host, in life's faint, willing end, later than light thy consciousness accost me till it depart, persuading mind. This idea of being the outcast be, who never heard that fleshless chant rise solemn on the tree, as if, to finish now with the simile, as if some caravan of sound off deserts in the sky had parted rank, then knit and swept in seamless company. The only other time she uses seamless is poem 409, the seamless grass. Well, it's an amazing poem about inspiration and poetry. I think at 2a her argument is that inspiration is a miracle, much like nature. I mean, it's ubiquitous and yet somehow very difficult to explain. At 2b, I love all the word choices, especially thrum. It's wonderful. Quiver. And at 3a, as we said, Shelley, I think, and Keats are standing behind much of this. This is Emily, the romantic poet, if you will. Obviously, defensive poetry comes to mind as well for Shelley. Finally, at 3b, what was a time when you felt inspired? And I'm hopeful that your reading of Emily's poetry is inspiring you. Guys, start writing some poetry. I hope so. Thank you.